King Akinwande's warriors prepared themselves, sharpening blades and checking supplies. Among them was Jagun, the legendary obsidian blade master. As he ran a whetstone along his deadly daggers, he thought back to the king's chilling instructions. "That deceitful snake Adaku has poisoned my son's mind," Akinwande had snarled. "Find Azubuike and return him, by force if needed. But if the princess has utterly corrupted him, her blood will be the first draft rekindling our ancestral rites of purification." Jagun's withered lips curled into a skeletal smile as he remembered those cold words. He would honor this dark covenant without mercy. "Jagun, I've heard tales of your methods. Will you truly spill the princess's blood if needed?" someone asked. The assassin's dead eyes bored into the man. "The king's oath weighs heavier than any moral constraints. Adaku will embrace cold finality if his highness has been too tainted to redeem." The warrior paled but gave a solemn nod. This would be a hunt steeped in profane ancestral savageries, no matter the cost. Across the border in Oyoland, King Olawale's warriors also made ready. News of Akinwande's ruthless manhunt had spread, igniting fears for Princess Adaku's safety. Olawale would take no chances. In the royal courtyard, the king addressed his fiercest trackers and mystic protectors. "That bitter snake Akinwande grows restless searching for my daughter. His pride blinds his judgment. He may order harsh actions against Adaku if they locate the prince together." The warriors muttered in anger at such a threat. Olawale raised his hand for silence. One wizened sorcerer named Baki stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with our combined arts, we can weave an impenetrable sanctuary. Not a hair on the princess's head shall be disturbed." Olawale nodded firmly. "See that it is done. And prepare our own assassin cabals as well as eyes burned with hate. If that paranoid dog of Iwoland threatens my Adaku's life, I will permanently remove his twisted ambitions from this world myself." The warriors exchanged grim looks. Baki simply inclined his head. "As you command, my king. The cycle shall end with our blades if needed." Suddenly, Queen Funmalayo approached, her face set in determination. "My husband," she said firmly, "I request to join the search for our daughter." Olawale's eyes widened slightly. "You wish to accompany the warriors? But my love, this could prove a perilous journey against Akinwande's ruthless forces." Funmalayo lifted her chin. "All the more reason you should have Oyoland's fiercest defender by your side. I am more than just a queen, the first I am a battle-tested warrior of the highest caliber." She laid a calloused hand on the ornate sword belted at her waist. "This blade has tasted the blood of 1,000 foes. It thirsts to protect our precious Adaku from whatever threats the Iwoland snakes unleash." Olawale studied his wife carefully. Her strength and valor were renowned, but the thought of losing her hammered at his heart. "I understand your abilities, my lioness," he said slowly. "But if Akinwande's hunters should capture you," he didn't finish the chilling thought. Funmalayo met his gaze levelly. "Then they will face the terrible totems of my warrior's rage. I would sooner be reborn into the next life than let that arrogant dog or his cult butchers defile our family's blood." The warriors watched the exchange in tense silence. Finally, Olawale gave a weary nod. "Very well. But you must allow Baki's acolytes to lay every protective ward and shroud upon you. Akinwande cannot be allowed to strike you down." Funmalayo clasped his hand and managed a thin smile. "Have no fear, my love. The ancestors' thunderous mantles shall shield me from all unmaking on this quest." As she strode away to prepare, Olawale prayed his wife's audacious spirit would not blind her to Akinwande's depraved obsessions. For he knew, if unleashed, Funmalayo's fury could potentially ignite a conflict that no mystic veil could extinguish. While the kingdoms of Iwoland and Oyoland descended into chaos over the missing heirs, Alakija and Abidemi had found peace in the simple village of Agada. Thanks to the kindness of Mama Nneka and Baba Oruko, they were able to start new humble lives far from the prejudices of their former homes. Days turned into weeks as the former prince and princess threw themselves into the hard labor of farm work on Mama Nneka's lands. At first, the callous toils nearly broke them bent over the fields from sunrise to sunset. plowing the dry soil and harvesting crops under the baking sun. But Alakija and Abidemi attacked each task with relentless good cheer, finding profound satisfaction in the most menial efforts. Their joyful banter and playful flirtations helped the backbreaking days pass quickly. "Ah, my radiant Abidemi," Alakija would call out cheerfully. "Your divine glow shames even the midday sun straining to parch us today." Abidemi would laugh merrily. "And you, my brave Alakija, your rippling stallion muscles prove mere child's play of these meager chores." Their bright spirits and vigorous work ethic quickly impressed the gruff Mama Nneka. Before long, she stunned them by offering the vacant farmhand's hut as a proper home for the couple. "You two lovebirds have toiled as hard as any field mutt I've seen," she said gruffly. "Reckon that ramshackle hut's cozier than another week piled in the tool shed." Alakija and Abidemi could barely contain their joy and gratitude. Within a few days, they had transformed the dilapidated hut into a cherished sanctuary. Alakija patched the leaking roof and repaired the crumbling mud brick walls, while Abidemi cultivated a small garden of fragrant herbs and flowers around the perimeter. "See, my love," Alakija said proudly, wrapping his arms around Abidemi as they admired their humble home. "Our eternal truth can radiate wherever we nurture fertile new roots, no matter how simple." Abidemi smiled and kissed him on the forehead tenderly. The setting sun cast over Agada as Alakija and Abidemi sat outside their cozy hut. They had just finished tending to Abidemi's small herb and flower garden, pulling weeds and pruning overgrown bushes. As they sipped cool water from earthen cups, Abidemi turned to Alakija with a thoughtful expression. "My love," she said softly, "don't you think it's time we considered getting married and starting a family of our own?" Alakija paused, taking a long drink before replying carefully. "Having children together is certainly a beautiful dream, my radiant Abidemi, but we must think practically as well." He reached over and took her hand. "We may have carved out a simple but happy existence here, but we're still not fully settled. And who knows," his voice dropped lower with worry, "our families could still be out there searching for us even now." Abidemi's eyes widened slightly at the idea of their royal parents locating them in this remote village, but she quickly shook her head dismissively. "Surely that's impossible after all this time," she said with confidence. "We're over 1,000 miles from Iwoland and Oyoland. The chances of them tracking us down are non-existent." "I wish I could share your optimism about our families never tracking us down, my love. But we cannot be so sure, at least not about my father." He stared off into the distance, a haunted look in his eyes. "King Akinwande is one of the most ruthless men alive. He will stop at nothing to hunt me down, even after all this time and distance." Abidemi felt a shiver run down her spine at the hardness in Alakija's voice, but there was an undercurrent of something darker, more obsessive. "You really think he would go to such extremes?" she asked quietly. "All this over our forbidden love?" Alakija turned back to her, his expression grave. "You don't know the depths of his depravity, my radiant Abidemi. If Akinwande ever located us," he trailed off, seemingly unable to voice such evil possibilities. Taking her hands, he locked eyes with her intensely. "Listen to me. If by some cosmic injustice my father did find us, I have no doubt he would try to punish you in the cruelest ways imaginable to break my spirit." Abidemi felt icy dread grip her at the implication, such as? The muscles in Alakija's jaw twitched, "Forcing me to watch as you die a slow, torturous death right before my eyes. It would be the ultimate purification in his sick mind for betraying his bloodline with our love. That's why we must give it more time. My luminous angel," he murmured into her hair. "Let's continue building our new lives here in peace. And when we've saved enough money, we'll flee to somewhere so impossibly remote that no ancestral poison can ever find us again." She leaned closer, giving Alakija an imploring look. "My brave Alakija, we've been given a miraculous second chance at nurturing our love freely in this fertile new realm. Why not fully embrace that blessing by consecrating our union?" Her hand drifted to her belly. "And perhaps planting the seed of a new generation to help sow our eternal truth and ideals." Alakija felt his heart swell at the thought of Abidemi carrying their child. But the pragmatic prince couldn't silence his cautious instincts so easily. "You speak from your heart's purest place as always, my love," he said gently. "And you've rekindled my own desire to intertwine our ancestral bloodlines into the next proud tree of life." His expression turned grim. "But we cannot ignore the darkest possibilities either. If our parents did somehow locate us with a new family in tow," he didn't finish the thought, not wanting to voice such sinister implications. Abidemi frowned stubbornly. She opened her mouth to protest further, but Alakija raised his hand. "Please, my luminous angel, hear me out. I'm not dismissing your sacred wish. I too dream of the day we can consecrate our love's divine energies through new offspring." He gave her a meaningful look. "But we must be pragmatic and ensure we've truly transcended the long shadows of our family's hatred first." Reaching out, he cupped Abidemi's face tenderly. "Give me a little more time to reinforce our peaceful new roots before we plant that most precious seedling. I will not risk any lingering ancestral poisons contaminating our unity." Abidemi's defiant expression softened as she gazed into her soulmate's eyes. She knew his hesitation came from a place of wisdom and protection, not fear. With a small smile, she laid her hand over his. "You're right, my courageous spirit," she said fondly. "As always, your foresight walks the balanced path. We'll continue nurturing our loving truth here in Agada." First, her eyes gleamed with promise. "But soon enough, I shall hold you to finally making me the mother of your celestial heirs." Alakija and Abidemi held each other close, letting the warm evening breeze soothe their suddenly somber mood. Though Agada had provided a sanctuary from their former turmoils, some lingering shadows still haunted the corners of their hearts. The sound of approaching footsteps on the dirt path drew their attention. Turning, they spotted a familiar figure making his way towards their little hut, silhouetted by the fading sunset. It was Baba Oruko, the kind old fisherman who had first taken them in upon arriving as bedraggled strangers all those months ago. A wide smile creased the wizened man's weathered features as he raised a hand in greeting. "Well now, if it isn't my two young friends," he called out cheerfully. "It's been too long since this old codger stopped by to see how you're faring." Alakija and Abidemi's faces lit up with surprised delight at the unexpected visit from their original benefactor. Rising to their feet, they moved to embrace the elderly fisherman. "My beamed. Please have a seat and rest from your journey. We'll fetch you some cool palm wine to refresh yourself." The old man waved them off with a chuckle. "No need to fuss over an old lake rat like me now. I just came to bask in the joys of seeing two more hard-working souls blossom under Agada's nurturing soils." Abidemi refused and insisted on the palm wine. "Well, okay, if you insist," Baba Oruko said. His eyes twinkled as he appraised the well-tended garden and sturdy hut before them. "And I'd say the two of you have taken to our simple village like a newly spawned hatchling to water. Why, it seems like just yesterday you arrived on my riverbank, lost as a couple of honey-glazed meadow mice." Alakija laughed at the affectionate barb. "Thanks to your kindness in shepherding us here, we found more contentment than even our regal daydreams could have imagined, old friend." "Ah, don't sell yourselves short on the hard graft you've spilled," Baba Oruko said with pride. "From what I've seen, you two have embraced Agada's honest values like you were born of our fertile plains yourselves. But I'd be a blind old coot not to notice the extra dollop of weariness weighing you both down this evening. Is everything well in your little patch of paradise?" Alakija traded a look, considering how much to share of their lingering concerns, but he quickly decided it would be better to keep quiet. In the kingdom of Iwoland, tensions ran high as King Akinwande's efforts to locate his missing son Princess Adaku remained fruitless. The monarch had dispatched his most cunning seers and trackers across the lands, but month after month, they returned empty-handed and disappointed their ruler. On this particular morning, Akinwande sat brooding in his private quarters, his rage simmering like a battering ram waiting to be unleashed. A servant hurried in, head bowed low. "Your Highness, one of the seers you sent forth has returned. He requests an urgent audience." Akinwande's eyes narrowed dangerously. And what use is that fool's return if he brings no news of my son's whereabouts?" he spat. "I should have that inept dog flogged for wasting my time further." The servant flinched but stood his ground. "He claims to have discovered something important regarding the prince this time, Your Grace. He pleads for just a few moments." For a tense moment, the king looked about to order the seer flogged on principle. But then his expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of desperation piercing his stony visage. With a curt wave of his hand, he gave his assent. "Very well. Send in this seer quickly before I reconsider extending any more impatient indulgences." The servant bowed rapidly and fled. Minutes later, the study's doors opened again to admit a wizened, robed figure. A tense silence hung in the throne room as King Akinwande glared at the aged seer before him. Abasi trembled slightly, well aware of the volatile monarch's legendary rages. "Speak up," wretch. Akinwande's voice was low but laced with menace. "And for your own sake, pray the words leaving your decrepit lips are not further wastes of my dwindling patience." Abasi swallowed hard, pulling himself upright with as much dignity as he could muster. When he spoke, his voice was hushed but steady. "Great Lion of Iwoland, I come before you bearing a vision. One bestowed upon me last night by the gods themselves during my nightly spirit callings." The seer paused, studying Akinwande's expression carefully. The king's scowl deepened, but he gave a curt nod for Abasi to continue. "In this vision, I beheld your son, the prince. He lives, my king." A ripple of shock spread through the throne room at those words. The gathered nobles and advisors began murmuring excitedly until Akinwande raised a hand, silencing them instantly. His gaze remained fixed on the seer with an intensity that could split stone. "You saw Azubwike?" Alive, his voice was little more than a guttural rasp. "Speak on, quickly." Abasi rushed onwards before he lost his nerve completely. "Yes, your highness. Prince Azubwike yet walks among the living realms." But he faltered, fearful of the king's reaction to what came next. "But what, you sniveling leper?" Akinwande's bellow made the seer jump. "Spit out the rest before I have your lying tongue removed for wasting precious seconds." "He labors," Great One Abasi stammered, "toiling the soils like a common field hand, stripped of all noble vestments and privilege. I saw him breaking his back in hard labor under the hot sun, all for mere sustenance and meager shelter." He took a steadying breath before uttering the words he knew would inflame Akinwande's wrath to its boiling point. "And the vile Oyolander concubine Adaku. She remains by his side through this wretched existence he has inherited." A deafening silence fell over the throne room. For a long moment, Akinwande was utterly still and expressionless, an undeniable storm silently gathering in his eyes. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, his features began contorting in a sickening rictus grin that stretched wider and wider. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a ragged whisper that nonetheless carried to every corner of the chamber. "So my cowardly whelp of an heir lives, reduced to a pathetic mockery of ancestral dignity, no doubt utterly poisoned by that Oyolander whore's sorceries." His eyes seemed to glisten with unholy glee. "But he clings to this damnably stubborn falsehood I can still rectify." "Yes." Abasi felt rooted in place, unable to tear his gaze away from the unnatural smile Akinwande wore, the haunting visage of a father's unconditional love warping into something far more twisted and profane. "Tell me, filthy starmonger," the king's voice oozed with dark promise. "In this vision of yours, did you by chance happen to glimpse where my rightful heir currently wallows in disgrace beside his serpent mistress?" The seer opened his mouth, but no words came out. He could only manage a weak, terrified nod. Akinwande's smile stretched even further, taking on aspects of a demonic leer. "Excellent. Then you shall accompany my personal armsman to lead us straight to this pathetic affront against Iwoland's bloodline." His eyes smoldered like the pits of an ancient fire cult. "I would not rob myself of the personal privilege of reaping this sordid transgression in the most permanent of ways." Akinwande's brow furrowed as Abasi spoke in a trembling voice. "My king, there is a grave issue." The king looked at him impatiently. "Out with it. What troubles you now, seer?" Abasi wrung his hands nervously. "All of our most trusted warriors and trackers, even the ruthless Jagun, have already departed to hunt for Princess Adaku." Akinwande's eyes widened as he realized the truth of the seer's words. He slowly stroked his jaw, pondering this complication. With his elite forces already deployed elsewhere, he had no formidable warriors remaining to counter them if needed. "How could I have forgotten dispatching that obsidian assassin and his butchers?" the king muttered, half to himself. Seconds later, he smiled to himself, say, "I think I have got a plan." The evening meal in Alakija and Abidemi's humble hut was a lively affair, filled with cheerful conversation and Baba Oruko's uproarious laughter. The old fisherman had eagerly accepted their offer to join them, having worked up quite an appetite on his travels that day. "By the blessed rivers, Abidemi, this vegetable stew is divine," Baba Oruko exclaimed between hearty mouthfuls. "You've outdone yourself once again." Abidemi beamed with pride. "I'm grateful the garden could provide such fresh, nourishing ingredients," though Alakija's deft preparation certainly elevated the humble dish. Alakija waved off the compliment with a chuckle. "Think nothing of it, elder. After so many weeks under Mama Nneka's tutelage, even a former prince has picked up a few culinary talents." The three ate ravenously, savoring every bite until their plates were practically licked clean. As the meal wound down, they all leaned back with contented sighs, patting their full bellies. "Oh, I may have indulged a bit too greedily this evening," Baba Oruko groaned good-naturedly, rubbing his swollen stomach. "An old fool like me underestimated your talents in the kitchen." Alakija laughed. "No truer words, my friend. I feel as stuffed as a prized holiday roasting pheasant myself." They shared a comfortable silence for a few moments, letting the delicious repast settle. Finally, Baba Oruko heaved himself up from the floor with an exaggerated grunt. "Well, I suspect I've overstayed my welcome long enough for one evening," he said, stretching his back with a series of pops and cracks. "You two young uns need your rest after another hard day's labor on the farm, I'm sure." Abidemi hurried to his side. "Nonsense. You're always a cherished guest under our roof. But we won't delay your journey home any further tonight." She gave the old fisherman an affectionate peck on the cheek, earning a bashful smile. Alakija clasped Baba Oruko's hand firmly. "You honor us every time you visit, wise elder. We remain eternally grateful for your compassion in guiding us here." "Ah, think nothing of it. Think nothing of it," Baba Oruko replied with a dismissive wave. "Seeing the both of you blossom into Agada's hardiest blossoms is all the thanks this old river rat needs." With one last round of warm embraces, the elderly fisherman turned and shuffled out into the dusky evening, humming a jaunty riverside folk tune to himself. Alakija and Abidemi stood watching him go for a moment. After bidding Baba Oruko farewell, Alakija turned to Abidemi with a tender smile. Even in the dimly lit hut, her radiant beauty shone through like a beacon. "My luminous angel," he murmured, reaching out to caress her cheek. "That meal was truly a feast for the gods themselves. You have outdone yourself once more." Abidemi blushed, covering his hand with her own. "You flatter me, my brave Alakija, but it was your culinary skills that elevated my humble garden offerings into something worthy of the royal tables." She leaned in, resting her head on his chest as his arms encircled her slender frame. For a long moment, they simply held each other close, savoring the comforting warmth and steady thrum of their hearts beating in synced harmony. "This is everything I could have dreamed," Abidemi whispered at last. "Our own little sanctuary of peace and devotion, nurtured through honest labors." Cupping her face tenderly, he lowered his forehead until it rested against hers. Their eyes slid shut in blissful resonance as their eternal energies intertwined in rapturous union. Alakija and Abidemi were complete, their turbulent cosmic journey finally finding peaceful harbor. Yet unbeknownst to the couple, their metaphysical odyssey may have only been entering a new, darker orbit. For even as they luxuriated in hard-won tranquility, the ruthless specter of Alakija's father plotted to violently raze their fragile sanctuary. King Akinwande's unstoppable wrath had finally locked onto their whereabouts, and the ancestral savageries he would soon unleash upon this perceived blasphemy threatened to extinguish the eternal truth flowering in Abidemi and Alakija's humble Eden once and for all. Rumors began swirling through the streets and taverns of Oyoland like a desert windstorm. Whispers of a royal seer from Iwoland glimpsing visions of the missing Prince Adaku grew louder and more insistent with each passing day. It was only a matter of time before these rumblings reached the ears of King Olawale himself. One afternoon, as the monarch held court in his reception hall, an anxious-looking advisor approached and bowed low. "Your Highness, more disturbing news filters in from across the border," the man said gravely. "It seems one of King Akinwande's seers claims to have received divine visions revealing Prince Adaku's current whereabouts." A hushed murmur went through the courtiers at these words. Olawale's expression remained impassive as he leaned back on his throne. "More baseless hearsay and rumor-mongering, no doubt," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "That warmongering snake Akinwande's desperation grows more pathetic by the day if he must invent supernatural fables." But the advisor shook his head solemnly. "I fear this is no idle gossip, Your Grace. My informants insist the seer directly presented his vision to Akinwande, along with strong clues about your daughter Princess Adaku's possible location as well." Olawale's eyes narrowed dangerously at the mention of Adaku. Leaning forward, he fixed the advisor with an intense glare. "Speak plainly then. What exactly does this vision of the seers purport?" The advisor swallowed hard before continuing. "From what I've gathered, he claims to have witnessed Adaku toiling beside the princess as common laborers, stripped of all royal trappings. The two were sighted living humbly, embracing some cosmic truth, according to the seer." A deafening silence fell over the court. Olawale's face was an inscrutable mask as he digested this potentially explosive revelation. After what felt like an eternity, he rose from his throne in one fluid motion. "Leave us," he said in a low but commanding tone. "All of you, be gone from my presence at once." The advisors and courtiers scrambled to obey, practically trampling each other in their haste to vacate the royal hall. When the last one had scurried out, Olawale began slowly pacing back and forth, hands clasped tightly behind his back. If this vision held even a shred of truth, it could finally reveal Adaku's lengthy whereabouts. But it also confirmed Akinwande was just as feverishly obsessed with locating the missing heirs, regardless of whatever dark methods or man's depravities he deployed. Olawale's brow furrowed as he considered his next moves carefully. Somehow, he needed to uncover the precise details of this seer's vision. The king clenched his jaw, feeling the familiar flames of building hatred towards his ancient rival licking at his resolve. He could no longer merely play defensively, relying on protective wards and mystic veils to safeguard Adaku. Not if Akinwande's ruthless huntsmen were finally closing in on their trail in force. His fists tightened. He then turned with an eye so intimidating. "I think I will have to kidnap this seer of a person so he can confirm, and also giving me the information I need to locate my beloved Adaku."
Write the word continue in the comments section if you want the next part, and please subscribe to our channel.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Kindly click the subscribe button, like, comment, and share this video. Watch out for more intriguing and eye-catching videos from your favorite YouTube channel.